The latest on what's happening in Congress, including where funding for the TSA stands. We're joined now by Therese Boudreaux with the very latest. Therese, thanks for taking time with us. Obviously, we've got people that are wanting to take part and travel to get to their spring break destinations, but they may have to face those long lines. A lot of questions about, is TSA going to be funded? What's the latest?
Well, the latest is that, unfortunately, there's not really progress on negotiations. So the White House last night, they introduced another counteroffer. They sent another counteroffer to Democrats. They've essentially some of the demands that Democrats have. They've said, okay, we'll grant those, but we're not granting all of them. So they're said that they're willing to implement body cameras. They said, and this is a quite a notable um, backtrack is they're saying, okay, fine, we'll say that certain sensitive locations like schools or daycares are going to be off limits for immigration enforcement officers. And so they've really they've tried to reach out and to find a compromise, but Democrats are saying that unless they get all of those demands that they have, which we covered at the center square, that they're not going to back down. They specifically want to see a requirement that agents get a judicial warrant on top of an immigration court warrant when they enter private property and arrest somebody. So the latest in the House is that House Democrats are introducing a discharge petition, which essentially, if you get enough votes in the House, at this point, Democrats would need 4 Republicans to join them. Then you can force a vote on a piece of legislation. And that legislation is a proposal to fund all of DHS for the year, which would open up TSA and FEMA and these other agencies that are running on low staff and unpaid staff. You would open all of those DHS agencies except for Customs and Border Patrol and ICE. And Democrats argue that by doing that, you can alleviate the worst effects of the DHS shutdown on the American people, and that lawmakers can, after that, come together and continue to try to find a compromise on immigration enforcement funding. But it's been over a month now. This is the third longest shutdown that includes either partial or full. This is a partial one in American history. And so that's a record that's not really great for Congress to be breaking, but that's where we're at right now.
I understand, there's an argument about Congress has the power of the purse because they control how much money's appropriated, as we're seeing play out now. But surely that's, growing some frustrations among Republicans in Congress. How are they reacting to this ongoing delay? And are they being impacted by long lines at airports?
Oh, they're certainly unhappy about it. I mean, House Speaker Mike Johnson, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, they're accusing Democrats of essentially at this point, because it's the second time Democrats have done this, of using or instigating a government shutdown in order to force policy priorities. And Democrats do acknowledge this, so that they'll argue that, you know, Republicans' refusal to only fund part of DHS is also, using this issue, taking it hostage. But Republicans are very unhappy. And they refuse to agree to anything less than funding the entire Department of Homeland Security, especially since it should have been funded in October. Congress is very late to funding the federal government for fiscal year 2026, which began this last October. And so they're really, at this point, if they actually want to fund the government properly, by the time they pass the DHS bill, and that takes care of the last of the appropriations bills for the year, they have, a few months that will be in effect, and then they're supposed to figure out a plan to redo the whole thing for fiscal year 2027. Now, they probably won't. They'll probably pass a continuing resolution to keep funds on cruise control. But essentially, Congress is just, whenever it comes to funding the government, it's a really difficult thing for them to do, essentially. And so it's, again, there's not really much progress. Republicans are annoyed. Democrats are also annoyed. And we're on day 32, I believe, of the shutdown.
Yeah, the taxpayers definitely feeling it, and they're paying for all of
Yes.
it, but they're also having to pay that time tax of certain airports getting through security when, as you mentioned, security is low staffed and TSA not getting paychecks. So interesting to see how these various gears of Congress are moving and working against each other at times, and the people who are stuck in the middle of that being those taxpayers. Therese, you're obviously watching a lot of what's going on in Congress, and we've got a marathon debate that's starting about voter ID in the U.S. Senate. How long do we anticipate that they're actually going to be debating whether or not people should show voter ID when they go to the polls?
So the estimate right now is that it'll take at least a week, probably 10 days. The interesting about this marathon debate is that it is essentially a hybrid talking filibuster. So a lot of, well, actually a small amount, but very vocal Republicans have wanted Thune to institute or to revive the talking filibuster, which would force lawmakers, would force senators to hold the floor um, and try to convince other lawmakers to either vote for or against the bill. And whenever they can't do that anymore, the 60 vote threshold would no longer apply. So basically, that 60 vote threshold would only apply to a bill if senators are able to hold the floor. And then it would just be a majority vote, which Republicans could then they could use that to pass the legislation. But Thune is wary about that. He says there's not enough support. So he's doing this hybrid talking filibuster, which means that the bill is still going to need 60 votes at the end of the day or at the end of the week at this point in order to pass, which means it likely won't pass. But it does give lawmakers, both Republicans and Democrats, the chance to really speak either for or against the bill. So Republicans are saying that they're going to use this time to force Democrats to explain why they won't vote for this bill that polls show the provisions in this bill 80%, 70% of Americans support. And Democrats are saying that they'll use this time to, force Republicans to go on the record about things that they see as controversial on the bill. So in many ways, it's not very useful. There are many lawmakers who have kind of said privately to reporters that they're not even quite sure why they're doing this because the end result is still going to be the same, most likely, that the bill is not going to pass, because it's highly unlikely that 7 Democrats are going to join Republicans in order to pass this. So it's kind of just show is what a lot of people are thinking.
And I think not being very useful is how some may characterize all of Congress in the past few years. So it's fascinating to see. They're going to go through this exercise, and there's going to be a lot of cameras on it. There's going to be a lot of ink spilled in the press about it, and a lot of talk about it as well. But how's the president reacted to this idea of it still having to take that 60 vote threshold with this hybrid talking filibuster?
So the president was very supportive of a full talking filibuster because, again, that's probably the only way that this legislation can pass the Senate. It's already passed the House, but in the Senate, it needs 60 votes. So he has actually said that he's not going to sign any bill besides a bill that would fund the Department of Homeland Security until the Save America Act is on his desk. And so, that does complicate things. Now, if a bill has been put on the president's desk, it's been passed by both chambers of Congress, and the president doesn't do anything about it, it will automatically take effect after 10 days. But it still is yet another delay on a lot of the activities of Congress. And this is what we've kind of seen from the 119th Congress. We've had this very partisan atmosphere, and there have been so many different projects and partisan bills have taken up a lot of time. And so you have things like funding the government that have kind of suffered because of that. And then, as we're seeing with DHS, even that process becomes very partisan when there's something that comes up. So the president is not happy about it, but in some ways there's only so much he can do because Thune would need a lot of support from Republicans in order to institute that talking filibuster, which he simply does not have. Again, there's a very vocal minority of Republicans who want it, but not the majority.
It's obviously an election year as well, and you've got candidates for the U.S. Senate being asked about the filibuster, and many of them pushing back on ending it, saying it's important that we don't have, as we've talked with Illinois Senate candidates here in Illinois, it doesn't give you that that pendulum swinging back and forth with different types of legislation for just whoever has control of the Senate. And Therese, all of this happening in an election year, but it's also the 250th birthday of the United States, and I can't believe we're already, way past the midway point of March. So July 4th is coming up pretty quick. We'll see if there can be any unity in Congress in the next few months to see if we can celebrate that 250th anniversary all together, or if we're still going to be at each other's throats in Congress. So greatly appreciate your time. We'll be checking back in with you in the days ahead as you continue to watch what's going on the U.S. Senate floor about this issue.